Safe, reliable, free, and honest support. Qualities you cannot find online. Until now. Introducing the next generation of online technology support. What technology malfunctions are troubling you? Let us know today on the all-new support forums at www.theapplepost.com.
Welcome to GeekCross, the podcast where faith and culture intersect. I'm your host, Jeremy Yoder. In each episode, we look at a topic related to pop culture or geekdom, and have conversations that use science fiction, fantasy, movies, gaming, or comic books as a jumping off point to talk about deeper issues and to wrestle with the big questions of life. I'm very happy to have JP Fairfield as my guest for this episode. Hi, JP. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, as you mentioned, my name is JP Fairfield. I do two podcasts, one with Sharif Jackson called Operation Cubicle, and another one with another group of geeky black women called Nerdgasm Noir Network. I'm also by trade, I guess in IT, that's the easiest way, because every time I say software testing, people don't understand what that is, really.
Right.
So that's me in a short little summary.
So what brought the idea for Nerdgasm Noir? I love that podcast. I think it's a great podcast. You know, you and your co-host crack me up all the time. You have
thanks.
A very unique point of view that I haven't heard typically in a lot of other podcasts, and so I think it's really awesome. So what prompted you to start that podcast?
Well, so me and my co-host, we kind of all met up through LiveJournal. I actually know two of the co-hosts in real life, either through mutual friends or college. So one of our co-hosts, Mel, she wanted to do a podcast about books. And she kind of mentioned, she's like, oh, it'd be cool. We talked about books because, you know, through social media, we kind of went back and forth about various books we like and sci-fi fiction. So we was like, yeah, that would be a great idea. Nothing. We didn't hear anything back for her. So she kind of mentioned again, and me and our other co-host, The Last Storm, we was like, that's it. We're going to do this podcast. You're going to do it. You're going to like it. We're going to have fun. We're going to be silly. And it kind of morphed from doing our discussions from just a book review podcast to the six-headed monster that we have now known as Nerdgasm Noir.
This epic, sprawling podcast with all kinds of subplots that happen. Yeah. Why noir? I mean, that kind of evokes film noir, but I don't think that's what you're going for. So why noir?
Well, I didn't come up with this name, but I thought it was awesome. So
it is an awesome name. It is a really awesome name. Yeah.
So one of my friends mentioned that noir was black, and I think the female version now in French. I don't know. I don't know French. I believed her when she said it. So. So we wanted to have a name that incorporated our enthusiasm for nerdom and also to make sure that our identity as black women was also incorporated into the name, which is why we have Nerdgasm because, you know, yay, Nerdgasm, and Noir, which is the fancy way of saying black. So...
No, that's awesome. I think one of the things I like about your show so much is that you have this unique voice. You don't hear a lot of podcasts, a lot of geek talk from people of color, especially from women of color. And so one of the things I appreciate is that you do have that voice. It's not just one voice; it's six of you. Is that what does that mean for you to be a voice like that?
I don't know. I think when we all started out, we just wanted to have fun with each other and just talk candidly. So we didn't really think about, oh, wow, we might, be a starting point for other women of color, especially black women, to be able to talk about certain things, except, being invisible in spaces such as nerdery or gaming. But I think now, even though we're still kind of see this as our hobby as a way for us to interact and bond, we kind of see this as we want to represent being a carefree Black woman. We just want to express that, hey, we always been here. You just haven't listened to us or heard our voices or seen us or really see us as we are. So,
yeah. I mean, what is it like to love something so much that does not represent you, though, in any way, shape, or form?
I don't know. I don't think I really see it in that way, because I feel like you can love certain things. You can love the thing. You don't have to love the culture behind it. So as far as the culture behind it, I'm not that concerned about it, because I feel that for me, speaking just for me, my one goal is to make a safe space for other Black women and also incorporating other women of color.
So let's talk about that. When you say the culture behind geekdom, what do you mean by that? What is your experience of that culture?
So, for instance, let's take the biggest example that's currently in the airwaves right now, the gaming community. So, the gaming community, you have this group which always had the privilege of the media and the companies always concerned about their particular needs.
And to be clear about the group, you're meaning white guys like me.
Yeah, white straight guys, yeah.
White straight guys like me. All right. Yes. Basically, the entire culture is oriented towards me and those who are like me.
Right. And even though I have been playing games since maybe 10 years old, like my first console was Atari. So I've been playing games on and off for a long time. It's just I never been part of that quote unquote gaming community culture where you go to, I guess the thing is, if you don't go to a con or don't go to LAN parties or sort of events, you're not a true hardcore gamer. And I really didn't prescribe to that because, one, I grew up poor. So there's some things that I won't be able to do. Like I wouldn't be able to go to cons because there is a price associated with it. There's travel. There's all these other things like LAN parties. I didn't have a computer at that time. I wouldn't be able to afford a computer.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that I've noticed is it's a very expensive hobby. Mm-hmm. And there are certain class issues here that I don't think get discussed a lot. But you do have to have quite a bit of money to really engage in gaming or in geekdom because ultimately it's about interacting with consumer products in a lot of ways.
Right. And I just didn't have that upfront money to participate that. And even to know about it, because in my neighborhood, it was mostly other Black people. And those Black people didn't have the upfront cost for that. So I wouldn't be able to get the information about that within my circle. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't even realize I was quote unquote considered a nerd because I read books or play video games. I thought I was a nerd because I liked math. So, and I was on mathletes. I went to math competitions. So I thought I'm a nerd because of that.
So when did you realize that gaming was a thing or reading science fiction was a thing and that there were other people that were interested in doing the same kind of things?
Honestly, I didn't realize it was a thing until I got into college. And I was exposed to other racial groups that did the same thing and said, hey, how come you're not doing this and that? And I'm like, I didn't even know about it. I'm like, I didn't even know it was a thing. I didn't know about conventions. I didn't know about gaming competitions. I didn't even know there was like all these different conventions for games and books and sci-fi. I had no idea. I just knew that when I was growing up, my mother watched Star Trek and I joined in, and that was something that we did together. We watched Doctor Who. You know, she loved time travel type of sci-fi stuff. So that's what I grew up with. I never thought it was anything different. Mm-hmm. You know, so it wasn't till college and people was like, how come you're not involved in this type of community? Didn't know.
And so when you finally got into the community, what was your experience and what happened then?
I think for me, it was just kind of weird because being when you're the only black person around a whole group of white people, it's kind of off-putting a bit, especially if you grew up with mostly black neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And when I was in college, my core group was that group of black students who were at a mostly white school. Even though there were other POC groups, a lot of times other POC groups kind of separate themselves from us, especially if they were foreign, which is a whole nother story altogether. So most of the time we end up banding forces with either a Latino group or Hispanic, but usually if they were like Pakistan or from India, I don't know if it was partly a barrier of language and culture that kind of didn't keep us eye to eye, especially in terms that we was both minorities at a majority white school. But it is what it is. So we was always very, very welcoming to everyone because we was like, we need to band together. What ends up happening is that you have this quote unquote mainstream culture that is like TV and media sci-fi, and that black people who go into these spaces that are targeted towards majority white cis males have to kind of carve out their own space within that. So I feel like that is a lot of my experience, is trying to carve out that safe space for especially women of color. I know at college we always had nights where we either play video games, watch anime, watch sci-fi movies, kung fu flicks. So it was just, you see all these people of color sitting from the giant TV in the main lounge area, just kind of geeking out. And then every now and then you might have, you know, a couple people from other groups, other countries might step in and just, you know, sit down with us, talk to us. So,
So when you mean safe spaces, what does that mean? What does that phrase mean?
For a safe space, it means creating a community, creating a group or circle of people that are welcoming and understand your need to be fully human.
Fully human. So you feel like that in a lot of spaces, you're not accepted to the point of being fully human?
Right. So in other spaces, I am reduced to either my gender or my race. I am the black one or the female. I am not JP Fairfield, who is also black and a woman. Right. I'm only my statistics.
And so in some ways, then you represent all black people everywhere because you're the only black one there.
Right. For instance, if I was to go to a sci-fi convention, I would get a question like, well, tell me, how do you feel as a black person reading this book? I'm like, as anybody reading the book? I don't understand what you want me to say. So I'm supposed to represent the entire black experience in 10 minutes. And that's impossible because I'm just a small part of that entire culture.
You know, as you described that, I recognize that leading into this interview, I was sort of asking some of those same kinds of questions. A little bit, what is your experience as a black woman? And maybe that's not always the right way of approaching that, and I apologize for that. Sometimes I think for those of us who have been told our entire lives that, you know, my experience is normal and universal, sometimes I don't think we always know the right questions to ask. So what are some better ways of asking you about your experience?
So for me, a better question to ask is just pretty much asking what's my story, what's my experience in general in gaming. And I'm sure that somewhere my experience as a black woman will come up. So for instance, someone asked me a question about the fact that I used to do a lot of PC gaming and I stopped doing console gaming. And someone asked, well, why is that? Once again, for me, class issue, I was poor and I was going to college and I had loans and stuff like that in school. So for me, it was easier to have a PC and just swap out parts than to get a console because I felt like the upfront cost for me was kind of high.
When we're talking about console prices, they're generally, what, $400 to $500 for a new current generation console? Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
And if I already have a PC, for me, I like to deal hunt, so I'm gonna find some good deals on motherboards and processors before I can find a good deal on a brand new console. Even just taking the time to approach people outside of your experience and just talking to them just about what type of books they like to read. And I'm sure they'll bring up black authors or other people of color because we want to see ourselves in writing. We want to see ourselves in media. And I think just approaching us as another human being instead of as our experience as a minority, I think your question won't go wrong if you approach in that aspect.
Does immediately sort of narrowing in on sort of you're a black woman, does that make you feel a bit like a freak? Is that kind of part of the issue, that like your curiosity versus another human being who just loves this stuff?
I feel when you go straight into me being a black woman, and especially if the conversation is not around race or gender or class, it makes me feel as if I am a subject to be dissected. I feel like people are trying to learn all about the black experience. It's a exercise in theory for people instead of realizing that it's my life. And so what that person may see as a interesting experience to discover, I see as opening wounds for other people to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is kind of a danger that a lot of sort of well-meaning liberal whites kind of fall into. We have a tendency sometimes to approach this, as you say, as theory, that social justice is not so much of a lived experience, but a theoretical experience. And I think it's very easy to begin to talk about, try to begin to speak authoritatively into experiences that are not our own. Because again, we've been told our entire life that our opinion matters and that we're normal and our experience is universal. And I think it's easy to wound people unintentionally. Because I think, like you said, treating people as subjects versus human beings.
And I understand that people want to learn about other cultures and experience. That is not what I'm arguing against. It's just how it's approached. And I'm going to be a black woman 24/7. That's something that I'm not going to be able to change, that I don't want to change, that took a long time for me to be fully proud of because of the images that I get bombarded with throughout my life that says that I'm invisible. So it's really important for me to express my humanity. It's really important for me to be able to fully trust someone if I'm going to retell my experience as a Black woman. A lot of times, a lot of my experience, especially on Twitter, is people will say, well, I want to learn this, but they really just want me to explain everything ever about racism and sexism, and want me to handhold them throughout the whole entire process. And when you get that every single day, that is tiring. That is so tiring. Because not only do I have to teach you, but I have to actually experience racism and sexism, which is just as frustrating and just as tiring. And you don't want to do that. You just want to be.
Okay.
So, right.
Well, now, thank you for coming to the show.
Right.
So we've talked about some not so happy things, and that, I apologize, was not my intention, but we went there.
It happens.
It happens. So let's talk about something more fun. Let's talk about some geek stuff. What are the things that you love, that you feel a deep connection with?
So I love messing with my computer. So I have this media computer desktop that I think I've been working on and off for a couple years now. I love the case because the case looked like a stereo.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I'm never letting go in this case unless it just disintegrates into nothingness.
Where'd you find a case like that?
I was on newegg.com.
Oh, okay.
And I saw the case, and the case saw me, and it was love at first sight.
Right. Music coming out of the heavens. Right. Ah.
So I have been tinkering with this media computer for maybe 5+ years. I have no idea how long I had this, but every couple years or so, I gut it. Well, not completely gut it, because people reuse. I might get like a new motherboard processor, and if the motherboard processor is still good, maybe I'll be nice to one of my family members or friends and build them a desktop from it. But it's my baby. I just love tinkering with it.
Does it have a name? Have you named your computer?
MC Beast.
That's awesome.
So my friend asked me, was I trying to download the internet? I was like, if it's possible, I would do it.
So what are you playing on your baby?
Oh, what I'm playing on it? Well, usually I use it mostly now for watching TV and Netflix. I really need to install Steam, but I haven't been doing that lately because I have a Wii U now. So I know this is like my third console ever.
We were at Christmas given a Wii. Somebody didn't need it. The original Wii. That's my first console. I didn't grow up with consoles at all. I grew up with a PC. My parents didn't believe in consoles, and so my wife was not thrilled with it, but we went ahead, and my eldest, who's 6 years old, loves it and is actually better at it than I am. I think she's a future gamer.
I think so, too.
But loves games. Is right now playing Super Mario World 2, or 3D 2, or whatever it's called. You know, the one with the planets and stuff.
That's such a good game.
She's really good at it, and she's able to practice. Like, one of the things that what happens with her, she gets really impatient. She wants everything to be perfect. And so video games is a way for her to practice at practicing. You know, that if you don't get it right the first time, you don't just stop. You keep playing.
Well, that's a good outlet.
It is a very good outlet. So what are you playing or what are you watching on Netflix right now?
So the last thing I watched on Netflix, I know I watched City Hunter, it was a Korean drama TV show. And I was watching a lot of Korean drama TV.
Really?
Yeah, it is addicting. You don't understand.
Wait, what's so addicting about Korean? I mean, I've had that kind of experience a little bit with, like, the telenovelas, the Spanish telenovelas, where
They're so good, too.
man, it's so easy to get sucked into it. I have no idea what they're really saying, but it's awesome.
It is. And then, well, this is in my queue, but they have Bollywood films on there now.
Oh, they're awesome. Bollywood's awesome.
Oh, my God.
Like the dancing, and they're just totally off the wall.
Why can't all movies be musicals, people? Why? I want to... what was it? It was a series, I think, Zoom. It was something DHOOM, and they had the first one and then the second and third sequel on there. I watched all 3 in a row. I was up all night because I think those movies like maybe 2 hours each. Didn't care. I was like, I'm going to finish it. I want to see people sing while they are in a car chase and stealing from a museum. So that was awesome for me.
There is some low budget Bollywood movie out there. I saw it, I think, on YouTube one time, where it's somebody dressed up as Superman, flying around singing, and then they meet up with Spider-Man and they sing together, and it's really cheesy and low budget, but it's also totally awesome.
Oh man!
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna have to find that. But what else? I think I caught up on Broadchurch, which is a pretty good show. Depressing, but good. If you like your UK shows, Broadchurch is a good church. But it's trigger warnings everywhere.
That's the one.
Trigger.
That's the one with David Tennant in it, right?
Yeah. Just all of the trigger warnings. I'm telling you now, it's yeah. Let me see. Did I watch any anime this week? I don't think I did. I think I was watching mostly Korean dramas.
So
Yeah.
it's just that they're just addictive because of the hyped up stories and that kind of stuff?
Yes, the hyped up stories. And, okay, I'll be honest. The male leads are very, very pretty. Just so pretty. It is ridiculous. And the fashion. Like, some of the fashion in this shows are insane. Yeah. But the stories are really good. It's a really good TV show.
Any specific show that you would recommend?
I think, okay, hopefully I get the name right. Fated to be with you. Fated for you. The story is about this rich guy. He is the heir to this great corporation. And he had a one-night stand with... I think she was the secretary in the company. It's just hijinks of how they even got to the one night stand, but she's get pregnant, so he said, well, you have to marry me now because you have my hair to the corporation, blah, blah, blah. So it's a really cute story. It's really, really cute, even though it seems like it shouldn't, like how I described it.
And how did you come across them? I mean, they don't really pop up in my, recommendations on my Netflix queue. So how did you find these things?
You know what? Okay, it's good to have. I think because I watch anime, it kind of gave me the recommendation. And a long time ago, I watched a Korean drama called Personal Taste. And so I think when I was searching for that, they kind of gave me all the recommendations. So they know my heart. Netflix know my heart.
It is frightening how well they know us.
And sometimes they'll have like lists. So I think it was one list called Foreign Dramas, and that's probably where you would find some of the Korean TV and movies and the Bollywood or French films. So if you go through that queue and put some in your queue, then I think they'll end up recommending more if you end up liking one or two of them. So.
Okay. So what else are you up to? I think you recently were at a con in Wisconsin.
Oh, I'm going to a con in Wisconsin this weekend, May 23rd, called WizCon. It's like a feminist sci-fi convention.
Okay.
So, really cool. I'm going to be doing panels there with my Nerdgasm ladies and Cherie from Operation Cubicle.
Okay.
So, it'll be interesting. I know one panel will be about beginners in podcasting. No, it's podcast for beginners. I'm weird. I don't know why my brain decided to flip that. I know there's a panel I'm doing about Black women experiences in podcasting. I'm doing another panel called Are Casual Gamers Considered Real Gamers?
Yeah, that's kind of a hot topic right now, isn't that?
Yeah, and I'm tired of it. So expect me to...
So, all right, JP. So let's give it to
Okay.
me. What is your thought? Are casual gamers real gamers? Why or why not?
Yeah.
And why are you tired of it? Of this conversation?
Okay, one, casual gamers are real gamers. If you play a game, you are a gamer. If you enjoy playing games, you are a gamer. Whether that is mobile, PC, console, board game, tabletop, I do not care what form it comes in, you are a gamer. We should not be trying to dictate based on stuff you like whether you should be, quote unquote, at the big boys table. No one cares. It's not that serious. It is something we should be enjoying, not something that we should use to separate ourselves. Again,
It's a hobby. It's supposed to be fun.
Yes. It's supposed to be fun. We're supposed to find enjoyment. We're supposed to share our interests. We're supposed to share our new finds with each other. And I'm kind of tired of this idea that if you do not game in this way, if you do not play these type of games, if you do not do A, B, and C on this weird checklist that seems to keep changing, you are not a hardcore gamer. I'm sorry, but I refuse to limit myself in order to be a hardcore gamer to console PCs where I just do FPS. I mean, first-person shooters all day.
Yeah, I don't like first-person shooters.
I don't either. It's just, I don't like the first-person view a lot. Especially shooting. It sucks. I want a crossbow. If I'm going to shoot something, give me a crossbow.
Well, I suck at them. I'm really bad at them. I'm the one who always dies first, and that's not a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a fight with the camera.
Uh-huh.
The camera screws me up because I'm like, where am I going? I know this is supposed to be first person. Doesn't it supposed to be easier? But it's not. Third person is so much easier to move your character around.
So why do you think that there are people who are gatekeeping and saying, you're a gamer, you're not a gamer?
Honestly, I think this is just a trickle down from society in general. We have a tendency to want to gatekeep. And when you have a situation where a certain group, sorry, white cis males, picking on you again.
Oh, you pick on me all the time. I could take it.
When you have this group who is so used to everything being focused on them, and just even a little whiff that 10% of the attention is not being paid to them, is automatic defense. Mm-hmm. And part of their defense is to say, hey, this group is not the real gamers. This group is not the core. They don't understand our community. They're just fakers. So you try to push out everyone who is not like you. And
so your presence sort of throws that all into question. Just being there challenges that kind of group dynamic.
Right. They had to rethink their position that always been given to them. Because their thought was, oh, I'm so good at this. I'm so great at this particular type of thing. And then when you bring in more people, but wait, what if I'm not so good at this? What if this is not the only way? What if there's an alternate way that I'm not as good in? And that freaks you out.
Yeah. Do you think there is more diversity in gaming these days, or do you think that the gatekeeping has been pretty successful at keeping out people?
I think we're kind of slowly getting there, but it's nowhere near where it should be. So you have two folds. You have the gatekeeping, which is trying to push away other people who they deem not worthy. And then you also have the groups that are saying, you know what? Bump the gatekeepers. We're just going to make our own space here. And then you have the people in the middle who don't know where to go. Mm-hmm. So you have all these different events that are happening concurrently. And so the process to have true diversity is very, very slow.
Yeah, these things move like glaciers, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, right now, I'm just concentrating on creating that safe space and probably bringing more people into the fold. And if, white cis males decide to come into the fold, I won't push you out unless you start not acting right, and then I'm going to have to kick you out.
So what could a white dude like myself here, if I wanted to come into that kind of space, what would be the way that I could do it without pissing you off and wanting to kick me out?
1, understand your privilege. 2, know that the group that you're going in, that you are the guest, you are the visitor, please act accordingly. 3, well, actually, this is part of 1.
This is an organized list, right? Yes.
Right, this is not an organized list. First of all, see us as fully human. That we are 2 people who enjoy the same type of hobby. Please do not treat us as your magical black friend. Don't pull us out when you get called out on racism and said, well, my black friend. No.
So you mean having black friends does not give me the freedom to be a jerk? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I am saying that. Having a black friend, wife, husband, child, cousin, brother, sister, mother, it does not excuse you from racism at all. You're just, you know what, for me, if you had to pull out one of your relatives or friends to use as a shield against racism, just proves to me that you are racist. That's my thinking.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really hard for some people to hear because, we generally want to think of ourselves as good people. But at the same time, I think we want to have really, terrible opinions at the same time. And those two things don't go together.
Right. I rather have someone, if they're a white cis male, who, if they mess up, would not freak out if they're called out on it, than someone who says, well, I'm the perfect person. I don't see color, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, I hate that. I really hate that. I think that's the most amount of nonsense I've ever heard.
It's so, when you think about it, it's nonsense. I'm like, really? So the only way you can see me as human, as someone who is deserving of your compassion, is if you have to literally erase the existence of my color? What is that?
Well, Ralph Ellison wrote a book, The Invisible Man. I mean, that's that experience. I mean, I find that when I talk to my co-white people, and they say things like, I don't see color, or the real racists are the ones who talk about race.
Oh, God, I hate that.
Oh, I hate that, too. When you talk about, well, what is normal? Like, what does not seeing race mean? And when you talk to them about that, what comes out is basically their experience. That when they say, I don't see color, what they really mean is, I prefer people who have the same experience that I do and that fit in the little box of life experience like mine. And it's a refusal to accept that, not everybody experiences life in these United States as you do. And I think there are a lot of people that really have a hard time accepting that. I think a lot of those white people have a hard time accepting that.
Yeah, exactly. And I know it's very hard to examine your privilege. Everyone has some type of form of privilege. Like right now, I probably have class privilege because I am considered middle class now, so I moved up from super poor. So I have some class privilege, and that's something that I have to make sure that I examine, especially in how I relate to other people. I have cis privilege.
By cis, what do you mean by cis?
So when I say that I have cis privilege, I was born biologically a woman, and my gender is a woman.
Versus somebody who is transgender.
Right. Hope I explained that right, because I'm still learning. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things, too, is I think you always are kind of learning. Because I think our awareness of certain things is growing, and there's often a lot of new information, and sometimes it's pretty bewildering. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that's not an excuse to stop trying to learn.
Yeah, and it's just kind of weird how people get so set in their own bubble that they don't realize that other information from other experiences are coming in, and how that can be diluted when you don't really try to examine it. So, for instance, let's say you are a white person who's super into social justice, and you hear a lingo that's from a mostly black population. So what you may hear may not be the actual definition of a certain type of lingo. Mm-hmm. So, and instead of asking questions or doing the research or saying, what does this really mean in the context of your culture, you just assume and put a stamp on it and say, hey, this is what it means. I'm the expert of this now, even though you haven't had any life experience behind that lingo.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, that's an easy trap to fall into.
Mm-hmm. And I think for everyone, we need to be very, very careful of that. Because I know, especially as a black, able-bodied cis woman, I need to be very aware of experience outside of my own bubble. I know I'm still learning about transgender issues, and I'm trying to learn more about ableism, and just trying to make sure that I'm not being a jerk.
Right. In what way do you think that science fiction and fantasy and genre stuff can help people become aware of other people's experiences and empathetic towards them? Or does it not? Maybe perhaps it doesn't.
Well, it would if people would read more authors outside of certain, white cis males.
Yeah, sure. I'm trying to think right now of authors who aren't. I can only come up with a couple.
N.K. Jemisin, Nola Hopkinson.
Okay.
I am very bad at names. Of course, Daniel J. Older.
Right.
I'm always going to say Octavia Butler.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always good. Go back, way back.
Right.
So just finding authors outside of your particular race, gender, and class. Yeah. And I know it's a lot more work, but it would be worth it. Because I know this year I am doing a challenge where I will read books that are written by authors who are not white, straight, or male.
All three or combinations thereof?
Right now I'm just doing all three.
Okay.
So I'm looking for female authors, whether they are white, black, Latina, if they're authors who are transgender, if they're authors who consider themselves gay or lesbian or non-binary. So I'm really trying to be on the lookout for any author who is not quote unquote in the mainstream. So hopefully that'll work out. I'm going to try to do it for a year.
That sounds really cool. I would like to hear how that goes for you.
Yeah, so I think I just finished DJ Older's book, Have Resurrection Blues. The next book I'm going to read is Panther in the Hive, Olivia A. Cole.
Okay. I mean, it's interesting because one of the things that I think that is sort of a narrative about science fiction is that it does promote diversity. That's the thing that we always talk about Star Trek, right? How groundbreaking the show, the original Star Trek, was back in the 60s. And I'm actually going through the original series for the first time. I've never watched all of it. And I gotta say, it may have been revolutionary back in the 60s, but by our standards, it's still pretty pathetic.
Yeah, and, and what's funny is some TV shows that are out now are less progressive than Star Trek.
Oh, yes.
And I'm like, how did this happen?
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
And so I know for me, I'm really trying to be more cognizant of my bubble and making sure I'm reaching out from that. And I think it's just a point to be aware of other people's experience, because that can add to your own. That can give you better insight to the world, because you are just this small, tiny part of the universe. And just realizing that it's just amazing and scary at the same time. But it's not a bad scary. It's just a kind of wild scary. Like, this is the world that is before us, and we know such a small percentage of it.
All right, and I also want to say, I think, too, it makes for better stories, you know? Mm-hmm. As somebody who loves stories, I want more stories, and I want more variety in my stories. I think, you know, what's so hard about first-person shooters is that so often they're basically the same thing warmed over and over again. And, you know, to have more diversity and to have more experience in these stories, I think is more interesting and adds something rather than just going through the same thing, you know, like comfort food over and over again.
Right. And that gets, as you mentioned, that gets boring after a while. I couldn't imagine just playing the same type of game or reading the same type of book over and over and over again. Because eventually, it's no surprise. You can just say, oh, well, I know A, B, and C is going to happen because I read this same type of book 50 million other times. And I think a lot of times when people hear diversity, they think, oh, well, if we bring people in, we have to push people out. And it's not a zero-sum game. It's just giving you more options. That's all, especially people who are considered minorities. That's all we are asking. We're asking for the option to see ourselves in other media, to see our stories given just as much love and care as quote-unquote mainstream white cis male stories.
A while back, I actually had an interview on one of my podcasts with Abigail Smith, who's a good friend of mine who has spina bifida and is in a wheelchair. And we talked a little bit about Star Trek and, you know, Geordi, who is also a disabled character who's blind. And I asked her, you know, did that fact that he was on Star Trek mean something for you? He said, well, and she said, yes, but I'm not blind, and so I'm not sure how to relate to just a blind character, just because we were both happen to be disabled. And I think that's part of the problem with sort of the tokenism, is that we put a character up who's supposed to, in the name of diversity, who's supposed to represent everyone. And yet, I think that's not always, the people don't always connect to that.
Exactly. Because someone will say, well, since you had Geordi, that should be good enough. Well, what if I want to see a black woman in my sci-fi more often? Why does the only replacement I have for being a black person is a black male character?
Yeah, right. I mean, I think storytelling is powerful. You know, I don't think it's that hard to add a greater diversity of characters and experiences. It's just too bad that there's so much resistance and it's so hard to get people to think about it.
Yeah, and a lot of it is just fear. That's what I believe. It's just fear that you'll be the one sitting outside a gate looking in. And especially a lot of that is around racism and sexism, especially with people who have privilege. Even though they say they don't have privilege, deep down inside they know they have that privilege. Deep down inside they are scared that when we bring in more diversity, that they will be the ones that will lose their privilege.
Do you think that's part of what's going on with this controversy right now regarding the Hugo Awards?
Yeah. Yes. It's so much so.
Why don't you say real quickly what's going on with the Hugo Awards right now?
Okay, so the Hugo Awards, I think the last year most of the nominees were people of color. And so this year there was a big campaign by this group called Sad Puppies. I don't understand why sad puppies. Why we have to hurt puppies? They did nothing to you. So Sad Puppies made a campaign to pretty much get people to nominate based on their ballot. And so this year, ballot was very male and very white.
And from the same publisher, too, right?
Yeah, most of the same publishers. So, interesting how that happened.
Isn't it?
And so the main guys behind Sad Puppies, I'm not going to say their names.
Well, that's what Google's for. People can find this stuff out.
Right. Yeah. You know, enough has been written and said about them. So their whole reasoning for doing this whole campaign was that the social justice warriors are squashing real diversity because we don't write how they want us to write because we're too controversial. We're not PC enough for them or some other crap. And I'm just like, what? Maybe your book is just not that good. Have you ever thought about that? So maybe that's just me, because a lot of these books that they was mentioning was that got, that should have got nominated. I'm like, those wasn't that good to me. Is the reason why I didn't finish that book and that book. It was the reason, people, and it wasn't because I couldn't take all the non-PC-ness. It was just bad.
It's just bad. And I think that's part of the problem. I think sometimes there's a lot of lazy writing out there and a lot of lazy storytelling. And sometimes people assign, because of egos, that the reason that nobody likes it isn't because you're white or isn't because you're male. It's because it's a bad book.
Right. And I mean, it could have been a great book. Who knows? I don't know. But it just seemed like the same book that you wrote before. Maybe that book you wrote 5 times, the first time you wrote it 5 times ago was great because it was fresh and new. But how many times you going to write about the white, scruffy, anti-hero male?
Right. There's a lot of white, scruffy, anti-hero male stories out there.
Yeah. So,
JP, where do you see hope? Where do you see change happening? What inspires you?
What inspires me is seeing young people who are getting into, whether that is STEM or gaming or even writing their own book reviews on blogs. I see that as hope because I see the diversity there. I see the starting of a brand new appreciation for just learning experiences aside yourself. Mm-hmm. So there's been a lot of organizations that came up, like Black Girls Code, and all those type of organizations that are coming up. I think they had Makers Fair. Where was it? Is it in Oakland? And they had teenagers who were had their own creative projects and were presenting them. There was a couple kids of color that was down there. I don't know the whole roster, but I saw a couple and I was like, yes. And then seeing, organizations being run by kids, whether they have different sexualities, gender, race, is just seeing them work together gives me hope.
One of the things I've noticed, my two daughters are 6 and 3, and they expect to see female characters that they can relate to in the kind of media that they consume.
That's awesome.
They really do. And what's interesting, they just had a book fair at my daughter's school. We gave her $20 and go buy some books. All the books she came back with had female protagonists. And so I think that's a big change from when I was a kid growing up, where you didn't have that many female characters, to my daughters. They expect it. And if it's not there, they're not interested.
Good for them.
Yeah.
Thumbs
up. They watch Star Wars. When Princess Leia is not on the screen, they're not interested.
Right. And so, okay, I'm bringing up DJ Older, Daniel J. Older again. So he has a young teen book called Shadow Shaper, and the fact that on the cover is a black girl with big, fluffy afro hair, and I literally almost wanted to cry. So, because I am cheesing ear to ear now, because I rarely see book covers with black girls on it, especially black girls with natural hair. Oh my God. I'm going to end up buying the book just because.
That's awesome. I would too. That's awesome. Yeah, I just think things are changing. I think things are changing slowly. I think there's a lot of resistance. But my daughters are not going to, when they have their own money and they grow up, they're not going to consume media that doesn't represent them.
Exactly. Oh, I'm so excited.
Well, JP, we've been at this for a little while. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
I mean, the only thing I want to say is that people just be good to each other, be understanding to each other. Don't be scared to talk to people who are outside your own experience. And you're going to mess up. That's going to happen. But the real test is, how do you take being called out?
I think that's a good place to end. JP, where can people find you out there on the internet?
They can find me at jpfairfield.me. I'm on Google Plus under the name JP Fairfield. On Twitter, I am under the name Isitis, Isitis. I am also on the podcast Operation Cubicle with Sharif Jackson, and on the podcast Nerdgasm Noir Network. Boom.
Boom. Boom. Very good. Well, thanks for coming on, and look forward to hearing your more of your podcasts, and thanks so much for talking with me.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for inviting me. I had fun.
Good. If you like GeekCross, please help us out and leave us a review on iTunes. You can find GeekCross on Facebook and Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @GeekCrossShow. You can email us at geekcrossshow@gmail.com. GeekCross is a McLaren production. My name is Jeremy Yoder. Thanks for listening.